Did you ever wonder what would happen if a 1911 and a striker-fired pistol had a baby? This is what would happen. The Hudson H9. Hey guys, this is the Hudson H9. This thing is a pretty cool pistol. It's a striker-fired pistol, but it has a ton of characteristics of a 1911. Of course, it's got the grips that you definitely notice, the grip angle that you certainly notice, and it seems like from the bore axis down, it resembles a 1911 in many, many ways. But on top, it's got all the characteristics of a striker-fired pistol. Of course, in the front over here, it's got something that doesn't resemble either striker-fired or 1911. This actually it contains the recoil system. The recoil spring and the guide rod is in here. Now the cool thing about it, with that recoil spring and guide rod being that far below and kind of in line with the trigger guard and the trigger, that's going to drop that felt recoil or the recoil impulse a little bit lower in your hand, and instead of coming across the top of your hand where the slide normally would go back with the recoil spring kind of right inside of it, usually it would go back and it would send that recoil over the top there and give you a little bit of muzzle flip. Now that recoil is going to be going straight back into your hand. So instead of it pushing the gun like this from a pivot point on your wrist, it's now going to send it back into your arm like that. So it's going to want to go this way in terms of recoil instead of going this way with recoil. That's the most unscientific way that I can explain it to you guys, because that's the way it works. Now there's some cool characteristics of this pistol that a lot of pistols don't come with. Of course, you have your front and your rear serrations. That's kind of cool. You do have your magazine release that is pretty much, for all intents and purposes, a 1911. Also, your grip panels, they appear to be exactly like 1911. They're the same shape for sure. They are recessed. They're actually, if you'll notice, the actual frame is somewhat recessed, and it allows the grip panels to drop down inside the frame. What that does is that allows you to maintain somewhat of a 1911 feel as far as grip thickness, but it's going to allow you to put a double stack magazine into the pistol itself. So it's going to hold more rounds. This one in fact holds 15. So while you still do maintain that 1911 feel, you have a striker fired or a double stack capacity. So that's a nice combination, something that everybody's been complaining about for many, many years. Takedown is very easy and effortless. The recoil spring and the guide rod is not something you can take out, so you clean it inside the frame itself. Where I think it distances itself from striker fired and 1911s is probably the sight package is really nice. I would say this is more like striker fired, but it still goes above and beyond. You don't have to do aftermarket sight changes on this thing because it's got great sights on it, tritium sights by Trijicon. Very nice set of sights on this thing, and they're adjustable and they're serrated to knock down glare a little bit. But the trigger is the thing that's probably the most unique about this pistol more than anything that I see, other than the recoil itself. It does have the weird little safety dingus that you find in a lot of your striker-fired pistols out there, like a Glock, a Smith & Wesson, M&P, and those types of guns. But it actually pivots from the bottom. The little hinge point is on the bottom, not the top. So the dingus doesn't hang, the dingus actually stands up. And what I found, that especially with my hands and my configuration, is that when I go to shoot, my finger is naturally going to the bottom of the trigger guard, which by the way is a very small trigger guard. You know, a gloved hand or a very, very thick hand may have a little bit of a time getting in there because it's not a very, front and back and top and bottom is not a very big trigger guard. But my finger normally and naturally wants to go to the bottom of the trigger. And that dingus at the bottom, I was a little bit afraid, since it hinged from the bottom, that maybe I would have some issues actually engaging it, thinking that I was too close to the hinge point and it actually wouldn't engage it, allowing me to fire it. That's actually not the case, and kind of odd that it's not, because I'm still able, even if I grab both sides of the dingus itself and pull on it to really not give any pressure on the front of the dingus itself, it still engages and allows me to fire the trigger. It does disengage that safety rather effortlessly. Again, when you look at it, you think, man, it hinges from the bottom. At the top, it looks like it's where, you know, it's going to be more effective as far as disengaging that safety, but it's not. It actually engages fine. And I think part of the reason for that is because the front of that dingus, it's not countersunk inside the trigger like a lot of these striker-fired pistols. A lot of the striker-fired pistols have your standard trigger is on the sides, and your dingus sticks out in the front in the middle. So when you pull your trigger, you're pulling back on that dingus, and then the whole trigger comes back. This one actually, let's say this is your trigger right here, your standard trigger. The dingus itself, it covers the whole foot of the trigger. So whenever you're pressing it, it doesn't matter if you're pressing the edge of the trigger or the whole front of the trigger, you're still engaging that whole dingus, because that dingus is covering the whole front of that trigger. So it's a pretty cool design. I like that. It definitely makes you have a little bit of confidence in knowing that you are going to have to be able to engage or disengage the trigger safety and engage the trigger firing in a high stress situation without having to think about it. The last thing you want to do if you're carrying this pistol or you need it to defend yourself or your family is you don't want to have to think about, just like you don't want to on any pistol, you don't want to have to think about placement of your hand or your trigger finger in order to fire the pistol itself. You want it to go bang whenever you pull the trigger, and you don't want any thought to be entered into that process. It's just going to slow you down or make you dead. So that's something that I like. This is very cool about it. I do like the fact that you have a really nice beaver tail that comes back here. This actually looks like it could be a grip safety of some sort, but it's not. This is simply a piece that forms the beaver tail. So you know, gives it again part of that 1911 look. You do have a bit of a bevel down here to aid in your magazine insertion. I see where they have the little piece taken out right in front of the mag well right there, right above it. And that's in the event you have a dirty or a bent magazine that goes in and you need to retrieve it and get it out of there after it's been spent. So that's something that Glock just did on their Gen 5, but Hudson does it on their first gun out the box, so kind of cool. You do have room on the bottom of it for a there is a light rail for a laser or a light or something like that. You do have to keep in mind that with this redesigned recoil system coming down so far in front of the trigger guard, that's typically where your light or your laser would actually be. So you have to remember that your light or laser now is going to be this far down. So it's going to be sticking way below your trigger guard now. And you probably better do some investigation to make sure that you're buying the right laser or light for a Hudson H9, because you may find that the way it's not backing up to the trigger guard, it may not fit proportionally or properly or the way it's designed to. So I would certainly question your manufacturer of your light before you go put a weapons light on here to make sure that it is one that is in fact going to fit, or try it out. Maybe bring it to the gun store or something like that. Overall, it's a nice gun. Let's see how it shoots. As always, you'll see that we're using our Armscore 124 grain 9mm ammo. Very consistent ammo. We prefer this ammo simply because we don't have to wonder if the gun is doing its job, because the ammo is doing its job. So if there are any malfunctions, we can usually assume that it is firearm related and not ammo related. You're going to get 3 steel magazines with each one of your purchases of the H9, so that's kind of cool that you have 3 metal magazines with polymer followers and bottom plates. You know, one thing that plagues a lot of the polymer striker fired pistols out there is the very fact that it has a very spongy trigger pull. Anytime you are engaging or you include polymer in with your trigger pull with a striker fired pistol, you have to understand a lot of different things are happening in a striker fired pistol, which also includes disengaging the safety. So between disengaging the safety, setting your striker, sending the striker forward, all of those things, anytime you insert a little bit of polymer in that process, and of course you add so many steps to it, you are now aiding to that spongy feel, where you really feel like you're having to really take that trigger and you're wondering why it hasn't snapped yet, then all of a sudden it goes bang. You feel that sponginess in there. In a lot of cases, again, that's because of polymer, but it's also because of the design of those types of triggers. This trigger was designed after more of a 1911 style trigger. The 1911 style trigger, instead of levering at the top, it actually sits in a channel and the bow moves backwards. And coming straight backwards, there's no levering, so it's not hinging like that. It's just sliding straight backwards. This is the type of trigger that you're actually dealing with in that respect. But one thing I definitely noticed is that your reset is ridiculously short. When you fire this thing and then you go forward again to reset, it barely moves at all before it resets, and it's an audible, very noticeable reset. You can hear the reset, but you can feel the reset. And again, it's very, very short, which it helps that it's audible and that it's short, because it is such a short reset that sometimes you wonder if you've let that trigger travel far enough forward before you've gone to pull it backwards again. You'll notice when you pull it backwards, very little take up, and then the trigger, it breaks very crisply. Look, I gotta tell you, this trigger is very much like a 1911 trigger. I'm not just saying that because that's what these guys pride themselves on. They've done it. They've actually taken a 1911 trigger and built it into a striker-fired pistol. That's probably one of the greatest advancements that I've seen in a very long time in a pistol of this kind. Let's test this thing and see what our reset is on this trigger, or what our trigger pull is, sorry. Let's see here. As you see, I'm using a standard Wheeler trigger pull scale. And let me try to get a little close where you guys can see it. All right, here we go. Okay, that broke at a little over 5 1/4 pounds. It's got to be less than that. It surely felt like less than that. Let's see here. Oh, 5 1/4 pounds. Maybe that's what it is. It just feels ridiculously soft. It feels like it's more 4 1/2 or something like that, but maybe. Let's see. Five and a quarter. Very, very consistently right at 5 1/4. An impressive trigger for a striker-fired pistol, I got to tell you that. Now guys, for the sake of comparison, what I've done is I've taken a Smith & Wesson M&P, and it's a 2.0 model, and I want to show the way having, if you notice the recoil spring, it protrudes ever so slightly right here. As opposed to being right down here, I guess I'll do it this way, you can see it. Instead of the recoil spring being here on the H9, it's actually up here. So it's sending more of that slide is hammering back. The slide is bottoming out on that guide rod back here, like on this level. Where on the H9, the slide is bottoming out here, hitting the back, on the back of where that guide rod is. So again, that's where it sends that on the H9, that recoil, felt recoil backwards here instead of up here. I want to see if I can see that. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be able to feel it. I want to see if you guys at home can actually see that. All right, the same ammo in here, the Arms Core 124 grain, and let's see if it's noticeable or not. All right, I gotta say that I did notice it. It is noticeable. It's funny when you're shooting the H9, I don't think you feel like you're gaining anything as far as the recoil system. In other words, it feels natural to you. As much as we shoot guns, it still feels like a low recoil producing gun, just like the M&P does. I mean, to me, this is a fine pistol. I love this Smith & Wesson M&P, especially this 2.0 series. It never felt like it had much recoil to me, and it still doesn't. But compared to the H9 has that muzzle flip that's kicking backwards. I'm sorry, reduces that muzzle flip that's kicking backwards that the M&P has, and probably most other guns for that matter that have that same type of recoil system the way this is designed. So it's a significant difference that I notice from a feeling standpoint. And of course, I'm filming this right now, so I haven't been able to see this, but as you're watching this, we would be putting it over the screen so you can actually see it. So we'll definitely draw some attention to that on screen in post-production so you can see the difference between these two pistols. But again, feeling it, it's not a knock against this pistol at all, or any other striker fires for that matter. The thing is, you're going to be able to get back on target a little bit faster with the H9 versus one of these guys. I think that's probably where the biggest difference is going to be. Again, it's not going to make me choose the H9 over one of these, but let's say we have somebody that's a little bit smaller than me, a smaller man or a smaller woman or a child, that, you know, a young person, a teenager that might be into competition shooting or, you know, plinking or whatever around, you know, going out to the range with friends and shooting. That might be a little bit more of a manageable, more controllable gun for them, the H9, simply because they don't have that muzzle flip out there. Shooting the same bullet, getting the same kind of performance out of it, it's just that you have more control and less uncontrollable muzzle flip. And again, you're back on target a lot faster. Guys, look, if you have not had a chance to go shoot the H9 by Hudson, give it a shot. No pun intended. This is a pretty cool gun. I gotta tell you, it handles fine. I like the weight of it. Again, I like 1911, so I appreciate the weight of this thing. But I also like the fact that they do innovative things. You know, the gun industry for a while there had gotten so vanilla because anybody and their brother who could build an AR-15 and slap one together could sell it for $1,000 out there during the Obama years. And the market and the gun industry in general had lost a lot of innovativeness. I didn't see many companies thinking outside the box, so to speak. You know, once the market dried up a little bit, when Trump got elected, we started seeing a whole lot more people out there that were thinking outside the box for a change and realizing that, you know, these standard AR-15s that were sitting on a shelf were not selling. We got to do something different. And companies like Hudson, they were already in the process of doing that innovative thinking, and I really feel like they were ahead of the game because they already had a product kind of almost in the can they were already working on. This is a husband and wife team that put Hudson together. They actually, from what I've read, they're fans. They shoot 1911s, but they carry Smith & Wesson M&Ps. So this thing is kind of a marriage between an M&P and a 1911, and I got to say, it kind of took the best of both worlds and did that. I've seen some complaints online from some guys that don't like the redesigned recoil spring system. Apparently, the original H9 had a different type of setup on the recoil spring system. I got to tell you, I don't see any problems with it. I've shot this thing, I think today I ran about 150 rounds. I know that's not a ton of rounds, but I ran 150 rounds, not one malfunction, not one. In fact, the only malfunction I had was to charge the weapon one time, and because of the extremely short recoil spring system I was getting used to, I actually charged it too small, too short. I didn't pull it back far enough, and my round was trying to come up and go into the chamber, and I jammed it in there. That was my fault, operator error. So yeah, I don't see any problems with the recoil system. I think it's fine. I'm sure they redesigned it as an improvement. You rarely redesign and go backwards. I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but you rarely do that. So yeah, man, check them out. If you get a chance, I know they're going to be at SHOT again next year. These guns are kind of hard to find. There's not a lot of them out there. So I would say go out and shoot one, but I guess there's not a ton of them out there. My understanding is Hudson is supposed to have improved, from what I was told at SHOT Show this past year, that they had quadrupled production. I don't know what original production was, so they might have been making one gun a week, and now they're making 4 a week. But nevertheless, if they've quadrupled production, that's a nice thing. So good to see the innovativeness out there. I'm curious to see if Hudson will be coming out with a 45 caliber and maybe some other calibers. I know that you know, the intent of the owners of Hudson, they liked the carry pistol. So my gut feeling is they knew they had to enter the market with more of a traditional style and size pistol, more of a duty size pistol. So my guess is they're probably going to scale it back and scale it down and go with more of a carry size pistol like the M&P Shield or something like that. So look for, my guess would be that Hudson maybe comes out with a smaller version of the H9 at some point for concealed carry purposes. We'll see you guys next time. Hey, if you don't mind, check us out on our Facebook, Gun District, Instagram, Twitter pages. Here on YouTube, if you don't mind, please subscribe to us. That's a big help. And we will see you guys next time right here from Legally Armed America.